Okay, everyone, welcome and good afternoon. We have another social emotional workshop. Today, our subject is FASD, which is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. We gladly welcome back Joe and Teresa to talk to us about this subject. You guys, welcome back, everyone.
Well, good afternoon.
You guys can go ahead and get started.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And actually, this is going to be, I added extra information to it because part of my job is also to talk about the effects of marijuana in pregnancy. So I added a few slides in here today for that subject too. So to start off with, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a range of disorders that can occur if a child is exposed prenatally to alcohol. And it's a condition that causes impaired functioning and growth deficits and physical characteristics that could be severe to mild. And so we're going to go through some of those. And like I said, talk a little bit too about the emerging data on marijuana and pregnancy. So this slide, granted, is a little old, but I believe that the last time I checked, that statistics in the middle that said 43% of pregnancies in Michigan are unplanned is actually higher. It's closer to 50%, like 47%. So, you know, basically, excuse me, basically, you know, throughout our country, half of all pregnancies are unplanned, and most women don't find out they're pregnant until about the 12th week. And also, we know that over half of all women between 18 and 45, which are the childbearing years, also admit to having 1 or 2 drinks per day. And so of those 54%, almost 55%, 15% are drinking at binge level, which I'll get to a little bit later. But that's all important information, and those statistics are kind of scary because basically it means that, you know, 5% of our population could be affected by an FASD. And what they're finding is that about 70% of children who are in foster care are affected by FASD. So these are my kids. That's Luke and Leah. Luke is about 6 or 7 years old there, and Leah is about 4, I think. And the reason I have this picture here is because I wanted to tell you about my pregnancy with Luke. Luke is 31 years old now, but when I was pregnant with him back in 1888, yeah, I've lately been feeling that old. When I was pregnant with him back in 1988, I had just gotten married. I'd only been married for about 6 months. And their father had graduated from college with his master's. And so we went to a party at a family, his family's house. And I had about 3 or 4 drinks. And so I was just, I wasn't very buzzed. I was just a little bit drunk, you know. And about a couple weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. So when I went to go see my OB, she said to me, or I said to her, you know, gosh, I just had like 2 weeks ago, I had about 3 or 4 drinks of alcohol. Is that going to hurt the baby? And she said, oh no. She said, your placenta is like a big coffee filter, and it will filter out any toxins that are going to get to the baby. So you know, you could probably have a glass of wine once in a while, once a week, especially in your 3rd trimester to help you calm down. You know, you can have that glass of wine. So I've been teaching parenting classes for about 28 years. And whenever I ask that question of women in my parenting classes, what has your doctor told you about alcohol and pregnancy? I still have the occasional woman raise her hand and tell me that her doctor has said the same thing. You can occasionally have a glass of red wine if you want to. Or another good one I hear is if you drink beer, it will help to bring in your breast milk, which is not true. And another one I hear is that my doctor told me I should smoke marijuana to help me with my nausea, morning nausea. So, you know, for some reason, women are still getting the wrong information from trusted sources. And that's why I, you know, have this program that I do in the community to talk about what the effects of alcohol are on a fetus as they're developing. So now we know that what my doctor told me is not true. All alcoholic beverages are harmful because they pass right into the bloodstream, through the placenta, and into the umbilical cord. So, you know, FASD is a birth defect, but it is 100% preventable if the mother chooses not to drink alcohol while she's pregnant or while she's breastfeeding. Because at that time, baby's brain is still vulnerable to the toxins in alcohol, because I think I'm almost positive that we've talked quite a few times in these presentations about the fact that their brains are not done developing until they're in their mid to late 20s. So, you know, toxins like that from alcohol and marijuana can affect that brain development. So, you know, my son does not exhibit, to me anyway, any characteristics of FASD. He doesn't have any of the facial features or the growth deficiencies. He's about 5'11", so he doesn't look small. He wasn't small at birth either. He was normal birth weight. And so for years I thought maybe he just hasn't been affected by it. Maybe I'm one of the lucky ones. But, you know, he corrected me last summer as we were talking about this, and he said, you know, I don't know. He said, sometimes I feel like I'm OCD about stuff. You know, I feel like I'm too like obsessive about certain things. And, you know, so it could be, that could be because of the fact that he has a little bit of FASD. He might be on the very low end of the spectrum, or it could be, you know, just something that he has. But that just reminded me of something. I'm going to share for a minute a different handout that I have that shows something here that you might not be aware of. Let me get back into this meeting here. So I want you to see this handout that I have. These are overlapping behavioral characteristics of some mental health diagnoses for children. And, you know, on the left-hand side is all of the different characteristics that one would associate with all of the mental health diagnoses that read across the top: FASD, ADHD, autism, ODD. OCD is not on there, but it could be. Poverty is also could be a factor, and trauma too, because of the environment. But if you look through here, so FASD is the gray column. So all of those characteristics are checked off for FASD, and they do overlap with a lot of these other mental health diagnoses. So that's why, you know, I don't know if the OCD that my son sometimes shows me, or also one other thing that I've noticed is that he perseverates a lot, which is like repeating things. Sometimes he gets into like a loop and he repeats things over and over again. And it never hit me before that he was perseverating. I thought he was just being annoying. But, you know, my daughter had said to me, hey, you know, it could be that other thing that you're always talking about, the, you know, OCD thing. I mean, the FASD. So could be, you know. So, you know, it could be that, or it could just be him. I don't know. But it was pretty early in my pregnancy. Probably, I would think now, if I think back on it, it was probably like the 9th or 10th week of my pregnancy. And so I'll have this graph later that I'm going to show you about how alcohol affects those different weeks of pregnancy. So the reason that I have this information that I have to disseminate through my grant is because not because I want to shame anybody or make them feel bad, because a lot of them might be like me and not know that they're pregnant. They even made a cable show about that. And they also might not be aware that alcohol can harm a developing fetus, just like I was. So they may have gotten the wrong information about that, or they may have an addiction to alcohol. And if anybody knows anyone, who has an addiction, how horribly hard it is to break that, and how it causes you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. It affects your judgment when you're using. And so, it could affect them also, even if they knew they were pregnant. So it's not about shame, it's about getting information out. So Tony, I'm ready for that first poll. If you could launch it, I would appreciate that. So you guys, I would like you to look over this question and just kind of make a guess. Which one of those answers do you think it is? Just pick one. And I'll give Tony will give everybody, about 30 seconds or so, 45 seconds to answer that. So you should be able to see, Tony, how many people have answered. I don't know how many are in this presentation today, but that'll give you a good idea of whether or not somebody's answered.
I'll give it a few more seconds. We've got a few more people that need to. Good deal. And okay, I'm going to end it now.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share the results.
Okie doke. Okay. So it looks like the winner is 5 ounces of alcohol. Pretty close with 4 ounces, 35% people said that. And 8 ounces, 18% of people said that. And I don't blame you, because when you're in a restaurant, you don't know how much they're giving you. Sometimes it looks like 8 ounces. Well, you guys are right, because, whoops. Where's my, there it is. So 5 ounces is actually a serving of table wine, along with the 12 ounces of beer, 8 or 9 ounces of malt liquor, and 1.5 ounces of hard liquor. And so, like I say, when you're in a restaurant, you really don't know how much you're getting. I went to a restaurant in Detroit, Mexican Village, and when I ordered my food and ordered a glass of wine, she asked me, the waitress did, which size I wanted, regular or larger one. And so of course I ordered the larger one, and I swear it looked like it was more than 8 ounces to me. So if I would have had a couple of those, I would have been binge drinking. Luckily I was too old to get pregnant at that time, but it just goes to show you that you really don't know, especially if you've had a drink, and you don't know what the recipe is, if they're following it, if they're just dumping it in, like what they're doing. So the mom, even if she has 1.5 ounce shot of hard liquor, she may not feel the effects, but the baby will. And the baby will feel it 4 to 7 times longer. Sorry, you guys, that's my dogs. That'll stop in a second. So you don't have to have an addiction in order for this alcohol to affect the baby. You don't, it's just any amount, just like I did that one time when my son was, when I was pregnant with my son. So if a mom does binge drink, which would be about 4 ounces or 4 or more drinks in one occasion, She might be drunk that night, maybe feel it the next morning with a hangover, feel a little dizzy and a woozy. But by the afternoon, she's probably okay after she takes some aspirins, maybe has a lie down and drinks a lot of water. She'll be feeling okay. But that baby, like I said, for 4 to 7 times longer, that fetus will be feeling the effects of that alcohol. So that's why this is so important, because the more alcohol that's in your system, the more damage. Let me see something here. The more damage is being done. So even a small amount will cause some damage to the brain, but larger amounts means that that baby could be, interacting with that alcohol in their system for, 2 days, 3 days. And so the longer that's in there, the more damage is being done. So this is the 40 weeks of gestation. And those red lines on that graph are where catastrophic anomalies are going to occur. And the yellow lines are where minor anomalies are going to occur. So you could see that there is no time during that 40 weeks that the fetus will not be affected. And remember, I told you that most women don't find out that they're pregnant, until about 10 or 12 weeks if it's an unplanned pregnancy. Look at the very top where it indicates the weeks up there. So we're talking anywhere between 9 and 16 weeks. Look at everything that could be affected before that actually comes. There's a lot that's going. A lot of the red lines are in those weeks, and a lot of the facial characteristics are happening in that first trimester. So the only time that they don't show it affecting is during those first 2 weeks, where the embryo hasn't been, connected to the uterus yet. But as soon as it does, that uterus is fed by your bloodstream. And so one time I was listening to a podcast by these 2 doctors that were talking about FASD. And they were just like hypothesizing. They weren't saying this was set in stone anywhere. But they were saying that, FASD is caused by the mother because she carries the baby and her blood supply directly feeds the fetus while it's developing. But, while women are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have in their life, men are not born with all the sperm they're going to have in all their life. So if alcohol is a teratogen, and a teratogen is an agent that stops the development of cells. So if men are drinking while their body is producing sperm, and those cells are damaged because of the alcohol, then he kind of did an A plus B equals C thing there. But they can't prove that. They don't know yet. There hasn't been any studies done on that. So it could be that there is some input to FASD from men. We just don't know. But in any case, with women, because our bodies are a host for this fetus, pretty much all the way through, they're being affected by alcohol. And so I added this one because from birth to 18 months, most women are, not all women, but some women are breastfeeding their baby. And during that time, like we mentioned before, their brains are still developing. So alcohol, and basically, if you've ever breastfed, you know that anything you eat goes right into your breast milk. You eat broccoli, you can smell it in your breast milk. It's pretty strong. So, when you drink alcohol, it goes into your breast milk too. And so if baby is drinking alcohol, it's alcohol is a depressant, and it will cause that baby probably to fall asleep. So they're not getting the nutrition that they should be getting during that feeding. And also, it's going to affect their brain development because their brain is still, vulnerable while it's developing and hardwiring. And so, it could still, after birth, cause that baby to have some brain damage. That's why the drinking age is 21, because they want to get kids as close to the end of that brain development as they can. So these are some, I have better pictures of the facial characteristics, but when they are diagnosing a child with FASD, what they're doing is they're taking measurements. They have these software that when they take a picture of a baby's or a child's face, because most of these the issues with FASD don't come up until they're about 5 years old. Not the facial characteristics, but just the behavioral and the learning issues don't really show until they're about 5. And a lot of times when babies are born, faces are swelled up from birth and you don't see any of the facial features. But in any case, when they use that software and they're looking at this child's face, what they're doing is taking measurements. And so short palpable features are the measurement between the corners of their eyes. Those are usually shorter when they take the measurement. They have a flat mid-face, short nose. They'll have a little fold in the corner of their eye, which I have a picture of. Low nasal bridge and a small and underdeveloped chin. That's what micronanthia is. And so I have a doll that usually when I do face-to-face presentations, you can see what they look like. But I do have some better pictures that I will show you so that you can see better than what this looks like. But also the thing about kids who have full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome is that they also have an indistinct philtrum. So that philtrum is that little divot you have underneath your nose, and everyone has one. Some people may have a very pronounced one. Some people might have, an indistinct one. But children who have full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome, which is different than FASD, they will not have one at all. And they also have a thin upper lip. So that area underneath their nose looks a lot longer. And so it's more of a distortion on their face when you actually see it. They may also have minor ear anomalies. So in this picture, you can see that one ear looks just a little bit lower than the other one. But I have a friend who is married to somebody that has FAS, and she said that when you look at his ears, they don't look, like one's lower than the other, anything like that. But when you look at the inside of his ear, it looks different than the other one does. I don't know what she means. She didn't really describe it, but those are some of the features that they have. So that's that little epicanthal fold in the corner of his eye. And, that really shouldn't be there unless, it's part of his, ethnicity, which it's not for this child. And this is a lack of a philtrum underneath his nose and a very thin upper lip. And you can see the micronanthia, small and underdeveloped chin. So it makes that part of his face look longer than the top part of his face. And then this little girl too, she's on the other end of the spectrum. So this picture is not very clear. I know it's a little bit pixelated, but she does not have the physical characteristics of FAS. So, you can't see her philtrum there, but she's got one. It's just very light. But she has the same damage to her brain that this kid does. You just can't see it on her face. And that's what worries me about this, because the kids who are on the other end of the spectrum, they have the hidden disability part of this because they have no facial abnormalities, no physical indicators. So when that child who may have an overstimulated senses, a sense of touch, hearing, and all that, they get overstimulated and they scream and cry, and that parent picks them up and goes to comfort them, which is the first thing that a parent does. They pick them up, they sway, they rub, pat their back. I used to put my hand underneath their t-shirt so that they could feel my hand on their back. Well, if you're an FASD child with no physical characteristics and mom or dad doesn't know that they have an overstimulated sensory issue, what they're doing is actually hurting that child, and that child will stiffen up their arms and legs and have this really high-pitched screaming cry, and they can't console them. Nothing they do will console them. And so I worry that that child will get either neglected or abused, because you don't want to pick up that child that you can't comfort, and then there's always shaken baby. The parents are just so, at their wits end. They're desperate. And especially new moms, there's a couple of months there where your hormones just are not back to normal. And you feel like you're, right on the edge of exploding every 5 minutes, because your body's still trying to regulate itself from 9 months of pregnancy. So these are the kids with the hidden disability that I always think about, like what's happening to them. They really need to get some services. They really need to be diagnosed correctly. So I wanted to add a couple of, like I said, slides here, because what treatment centers are finding is that they're seeing an increase in women, pregnant women, who are using marijuana. So they're going to treatment, and they're finding out, or they're admitting that they used marijuana frequently, while they were pregnant. And they also know that there's non-medical personnel in dispensaries who are encouraging women to use marijuana to help them with morning sickness. And so, that's why we're seeing this increase with women using. And, I get it. I understand, that I had morning sickness myself for the first 3 months of both of my kids. And, I remember being so sick that I broke the capillaries in my face. My eyes were all red, bloodshot red, and my face had little red dots all over it, because, it could be pretty bad at times. But there are natural remedies that don't involve marijuana. Eating several meals throughout the day, cutting back on the fat in your diet, in your meals. Ginger, everybody knows, if you live in Michigan, that if you have an upset stomach, that you can drink ginger ale and it'll calm it down, because ginger helps your digestive system. And there's also aromatherapy, like cloves, can also help with that feeling of nausea. And so, there are women who have it very severely, like Kate Middleton, Prince William's wife. She's got a condition known as hyperemesis gravidarum. And that's where, they're not throwing up once or twice in the morning. They're throwing up 10, 15 times a day. And so something like that, those women should be under the doctor's care, because they can become dehydrated and suffer from malnutrition. So yeah, they will probably, not only give them saline to keep them hydrated, but they'll also probably give them medication, but they'll be under a doctor's care. They'll be monitored, and it will be, that medication will be delivered in an amount that takes in the mother's height and age and weight, and the fact that she's pregnant. When women are smoking marijuana to deal with nausea, you don't really know how much, how many chemicals are in that marijuana. You don't know what it's sprayed with to increase its potency. And if you have marijuana with potency over 15%, you can experience even more nausea and vomiting from that. So it's not as helpful as these non-medical personnel in dispensaries are telling women. That discussion just should be had with a doctor, and not with somebody who's trying to make money. So are you ready, Tony, for that second poll? If you could launch it.
Let's. Okay.
Okay. So how does cannabis reach a baby? Just pick one of those. Let me know what you think.
Okay, we're gonna give it a few more seconds and we're gonna bring it to a close. And I'm going to share.
Okay, here you go. All of the above. It's probably a trick question. Everybody knows it's the all of the above. And so you guys are all right. Let me get back to this. So, no matter how you use it, whether you smoke or vape or eat or drink it, THC is going to reach the baby in 3 different ways: through your bloodstream and into the placenta, just like alcohol. It's also going to get into your breast milk because, like I said before, anything that you consume or smoke, the chemicals in cigarettes, the chemicals in marijuana, the THC in marijuana, can get into your breast milk. And also, just like cigarettes, secondhand smoke can also get into your baby's lungs and your children's lungs. And that's why, they tell parents now not to smoke around them because it will get to them. So no matter how you consume it, it's going to get to your baby if you're pregnant. And so the emerging data on this is showing that there is a connection between marijuana use and miscarriage and stillbirth. And so they're because it's emerging data, they're just starting to see the problems, like in treatment centers and with children who are born and exhibiting some of those characteristics that we're going to get to in a few seconds. And so they're doing early studies on animals, and what they're seeing is an increase in the risk of miscarriage and stillbirth. And that's how it was with alcohol too. FASD is a relatively new science. It's only 40 something years old. And so, I still, to this day, when I talk about alcohol and pregnancy, a lot of women, especially women in other countries, will tell me that it's not true. Alcohol does not affect fetus. And so I think that I'm probably going to still be getting some kickback or pushback with this too, because of the fact that it's such a new science and that they're just starting to see that there are going to be problems here. So, low birth weight, if that does happen for an infant, that's very dangerous because it brings about its own mental health issues like ADHD. And also they're going to have problems, fighting infections when they're first born, and their body's job is to build those immunities, that first year of their life, but it's going to be hard for them because their body's not strong enough to fight it. Preterm birth too brings its own special issues like, cerebral palsy, special care in the NICU, which could cause a lot of problems for them down the road. Intellectual disabilities, vision and hearing problems, and then later on in life, some learning problems. And so because of this, they're also seeing that babies that are born to women using marijuana during their pregnancies are displaying altered responses to visual stimuli. And so that includes that increased trembling that I told you about that they see with FAS babies, a high-pitched screaming and crying. And so what that indicates to them is that there may have been some damage to the central nervous system. And so, they're taking that as fact and not right now and not taking any chances with it. And they're also seeing that that the more women use marijuana, they're starting to see that THC can accumulate in their breast milk in high concentrations. And again, there's that developing brain being exposed to THC, so that could affect them. So end of day, what they're trying to say is that the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is recommending that OBGYNs counsel women not to use marijuana. And I'm going to say right now, I don't know why they don't. But they probably still are telling women it's okay because, like I said, I will have women coming to my classes telling me that their doctor has recommended marijuana and alcohol. And I know also that ACOG also has multiple times asked OBGYNs not to recommend that they drink alcohol during pregnancy. So they're still doing it, both of those things. And I don't know why. I don't have an answer as to why that would happen. It just does. But my job is to give women information so they can make educated decisions. And so I like men and women to know about all this information so that they can be a trusted source to somebody, even if they don't want to have kids, they choose not to, or they can't for whatever reason. They could be a trusted resource for somebody. So going back to FASD, I wanted to show you a few of the things that could happen to a child who has FASD. Some of the learning deficiencies and problems that could occur. So these two brains obviously are brains of fetuses or children that died at 6 weeks old. The brain on the left is a typical brain of a baby who died in an accident. The brain on the right is a 6-week-old baby who died from fetal alcohol syndrome. And that's the worst end of all the things that could happen to a fetus's fetal death. But if they survive and are born, then there's going to be some other issues that come up with learning and with behavior. So I'd like you guys to do something next. I would like you don't have to unmute yourself, but I would like you to try to read these out loud, not the word, just the color. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but I want you to take a few seconds to do that. Just read that color out loud, not the word. So I'm just watching Tony and Joe so that I could go in to jump in.
I got most of them pretty good. I made a mistake here and there, but you do have to stop and think.
Yeah, you do. What about the rest of you? How did you feel when you were doing that?
I feel like it was really hard to do it in the beginning because I was focusing on the word. And then I kind of looked at like the middle letter and started seeing like just the colors more than the word. Like once I got kind of halfway through.
I felt like I had to really focus. Anybody else?
It was a fun brain exercise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I felt like I was getting a little confused between the orange and red.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You really focus.
You really got it.
You look at the color, then you're looking at the word at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you automatically want to say that word yellow, but then you got to really focus and say green. It is hard. And that's why I wanted you to do that because it's a very small exercise to show you what it's like for a kid who has FASD. Your brains are typical. And so like Becky, you have this file cabinet in your head. The file cabinet has, all these drawers with all this information. All the information is separated by, not markers, but like tabs. And so it's pretty organized for you. And so somebody with a typical brain like Becky can say, okay, I just got to look at that middle letter and focus on the color and say it. That's easier for her. But these kids who have FASD or possibly a brain affected by marijuana, it's going to be harder for them. So that's just a small visual or exercise to show you. their struggle is, 10 times worse, 50 times worse, because their file cabinet is not like yours. It's missing some drawers, or it's missing partitions with tabs. So all their information gets smooshed together. So they're sitting in a classroom, the teacher's explaining everything. Most of the kids are like, okay, I got it. And they pick up their pen to start working, or they start, typing away on their keyboard. And the kiddo with FASD is still trying to figure out what he needs to do. So if he's brave, if he or she's brave enough, they might ask questions, might get a little bit more of an explanation. And then when they finally get it to, okay, now I get what I'm supposed to do. I think I understand what I have to do. They start to either write or type or whatever, and everybody else is done. And they're just starting. They've struggled and lagged behind everyone else. And if you're that kiddo on the invisible end of the spectrum and nobody knows you have FASD, those are the kiddos that are getting labeled with unmotivated, lazy, not doing it right, not working hard enough, not trying hard enough. You can do better than that, when they're trying so hard to do well. So that was just meant to show you, what it feels like. But though I can guarantee you those kids don't have that ability to think like Becky was thinking. How do I make this easier for me? They're just trying to figure out what she's talking about. So, besides those learning issues, they also have sensory integration problems. Like I mentioned before, they could be under or overstimulated. If they're understimulated, you guys know how kids are. They go out to play in a polar vortex. Pretty soon their hat and their gloves come off. It might be a little bit wet, and they don't realize that their skin is being harmed from the extreme cold because they don't feel it. They could be standing next to a stove talking to mom or dad while they're cooking, and they don't realize that their arm's getting burned a little bit or their skin's getting hot because their senses are understimulated. Or just the opposite, if they're overstimulated, every smell is going to be hitting them. Let's say they're at Meijer and you're, mom's shopping and you got this little 4 or 5-year-old in the cart. They can smell somebody dropped the pickles on aisle 5. They can smell the pickles. It's being cleaned up with ammonia. They can smell that. They can smell the guy pushing his cart past who hasn't bathed in 5 days. They can smell somebody else's dryer sheets and mom's perfume. And then add to that, they can see the lights that are flickering, if they're, they can hear every single sound, people talking. And pretty soon those little brains are going to get on overload. Our brains are able to filter some of that noise and some of that stuff out, but their brains can't. And, on top of that, they might have some physical problems with balance and motor coordination. So, many times Joe and I are in high schools talking to kids, and I don't know about Joe, but the teachers are always telling me, hey, the bell's going to ring in a couple minutes. Why don't you leave now? Because as soon as the bell goes off, all those teenagers are crowded, in that aisle or in the hallways trying to get to their next class. And I think about a kid who has FASD, undiagnosed. So they're already overstimulated, with their senses. And they're also a little, maybe clumsy walking down the hallway, and somebody accidentally bumps into them and it feels like they're being attacked. And because they don't have, that filter in their brain, they don't have very good impulse control. So they feel like they're being hurt, and bam, there goes a fight in the hallway. What I also think about is a couple of years ago, or maybe it was just like last year, there was a 14-year-old who was taken to an emergency hospital room, and he ended up causing a big problem. Big old huge security guard came out. The kid spit in his face, and he ended up getting roughed up by the security guard. And of course, every mom and dad on social media and every non-mom and dad on social media had something to say about that. But I think to myself, I wonder if that kid was a FASD kid, because the mom said already that he was having a mental health issue. So she brought him to the emergency room, and you can see in the security footage, she's pulling on his arm because she doesn't know he has FASD. He might not have been diagnosed. And so That's already really painful to him, and he pushes her because he doesn't have, his brain doesn't have that impulse control. And so, the security guard sees it. He comes out there, big, huge guy. I don't know if you guys remember this, big old guy. He comes out and he starts getting in that kid's face, 14-year-old, 14-year-olds don't have the best impulse control anyway. And so with FASD, it could be even worse. And so that kid spits in his face. Granted, it was a horrible, unhealthy, unsanitary, stupid thing to do. But, this guy kind of roughs him up. And so there you have it. Now the kid's in trouble and the police, blah, blah, blah. But I think to myself, how many times has this been a mental health issue and nobody knows it? So besides those problems, they also have information processing. So, most people can take in information, put it in one of their file cabinets in the right drawer, and pull it out again later. Well, these kids don't. They have really hard time with memory. And they might not finish tasks that you give them, or they don't know what to do because, like I mentioned before, they're trying to figure it out. They don't want to ask questions because they already know they're different. Everybody else gets it. Why don't I ever get it? They already feel like they're out of place with their peers. So they might say they understand when they don't. So they're sitting in this classroom, taking in all this verbal information, talking your arm off, but they can't process it and pull it out later. So they get labeled again as oppositional. They might misinterpret other people's words or actions or body movements. They may be taking things very literally. So if their mother says to a little kid, you don't ever, ever speak to a stranger because they could be dangerous, they might hurt you. Well, that kid walks into a classroom and the sub is there, which that kid was not expecting. Literally, they will just not speak because they've been told by their parents not to talk to a stranger. And that person's a stranger, I'm not going to talk to them. They have trouble following multiple directions. So a mom that says, hey, or a dad that says, hey, go in your room, pick up your clothes, make your bed, put your toys away, throw a rag around there and then take the vacuum cleaner and throw that around in there too. Well, they've already forgot everything you want them to do. All they're thinking about is picking up their toys. And then once they do, they get distracted. So an hour later, you walk in there and they're still laying on the unmade bed with clothes all over the floor and nothing's done. So they also might have trouble with tasks and routines, so they may understand that I try to tell parents, when I'm talking to parents who have kids with FASD, they have to be parented differently, these children, because, you're going to look at a kid who is 12 years old and expect 12-year-old intellect. But actually, if they have FASD, then you're dealing with a child who's got half of that developmental brain. So there's a 6-year-old in a 12-year-old body. So, that kid knows they've got to get up, they're going to eat breakfast. Mom drives them to school when it's not COVID. They come home in the afternoon, they eat their snack, they do their homework, they play a little bit, and then here comes dinner. And then, they watch TV, they go to bed. Well, this morning, mom has a business meeting, can't drive them, so dad's got to do it. Well, if you've got a kid with FASD, that just blew their whole day. They're going to be defiant. They're not going to want to get in the car. You're not going to understand. That's going to be a big fight getting them in the car. Finally, when they go to school, they're going to start their day off like that. And it's just going to explode into this horrible day for them, because of something simple like dad has to drive them to school. They might perseverate, which I talked about, that loop that they can get into, and also confabulate. So because they have memory issues, they can't remember some things that they're supposed to remember. So they fill those gaps in with stories that feel like a memory to them. So they don't see it as lying. They see it as something that's actually happened. And they have trouble with, making decisions because they don't have the red flags that typical kids do. So they lack stranger anxiety. They have problems with memories, as I mentioned, so they break the rules. They can't learn from natural consequences. And that's why I tell parents with kids who have FASD, you can't parent them the same. Even an 18-year-old, you wouldn't think that you have to supervise an 18-year-old, but you do because their developmental age is probably 9 or 10. And so, you know, they're not going to understand that something they're doing right now can affect them in a week or a month. Or something that's bad that's happening to them now is because of what they did earlier. They'll never learn that. So it has to be repeated to them all the time. They don't respond to reward systems. That's another reason why they feel different in a classroom, because other kids do. So they're never on that board with the green light and a reward at the end. They struggle with abstract concepts like time and money. And they have trouble entertaining themselves. So for a kid who has trouble entertaining themselves and doesn't have impulse control, that could be a mess right there too. So, you know, these can lead to some personal and self-esteem issues with them where they get labeled, you know, and they already know that they're different from other kids, so that doesn't help. And they often experience a lot of loss. You know, they may lose friendships because, you know, they're different or they're labeled as stupid, or they might seem like they have hygiene problems because they forgot to take a bath, or they did take a bath and they put their dirty clothes back on again. And so they lose friendships. They might get older and bigger and stronger than their siblings or their parents. And because they have no impulse control and they don't know how to regulate their emotions, they may react violently, and they may have to be put in a group home. And so they lose that. There's another loss. They lose their family, they lose their home. They don't always end up having the career or the college career that they've wanted, you know, the studying, the degree that they want. So there's another loss for them. And so if a lot of these kids go undiagnosed and they don't get the help and the resources that they need, they can have some of these secondary disabilities, worst of which is constantly being suspended from school and unemployment. You know, if you're not diagnosed, your employer is going to get sick to death of explaining the rules to you all the time, what you have to do. And why are you leaving early? And why did you get here so late? Well, time is abstract, so I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to work. And so what happens is, you know, if they can get the services that they need, a lot of times they will have someone who acts as an external brain for them, someone who will help them budget their money when they do age out of childhood and get into adulthood, you know, by society standards. When they're 18, 21 years old, they might have someone who can help them to budget their money, budget their time, find a job that will work with them because they have, you know, special needs. And so that's just going to help them succeed. If not, you know, some of these other things are gonna be happening to them. Like almost 40% of them getting involved in substance use too early. And then you're talking about addiction because of that unformed brain and because of the fact that they're so young when they start using. So, you know, how do we address the stigma? Just what I'm doing right now. That's my cat. So now it's my cat's turn. It's not a baby. It's an old cat who doesn't know where he's at and does that sometimes. So we can address the stigma by educating people, physicians, healthcare providers like myself, doing screenings, which I do. I can do a pre-screen at CARE. It's a free service that we provide so that parents who think that their child may have an FASD can actually go to one of the 5 clinics in Michigan where they can get a proper diagnosis. We're also working with places that sell alcohol. You know, there's a task force called McRUD. I'm sure you've heard of them. They're trying to get a bill passed so that places that sell alcohol can have warnings, just like cigarettes do. You know, consuming alcohol while you're pregnant can harm your baby. And then, you know, part of my job too is to let spouses and partners know, to be a support. Everyone really needs to be educated. And so this is also a way for me to get the word out. This is another program that I do at CARE. And it's a brief intervention with women between 18 and 44. As I mentioned earlier, they don't have to have an alcohol addiction. They can even be under the age of 18 if they want to and still participate. And what we do is we go through a couple of sessions and a couple of follow-ups and, some information that they might get from the health department or an OB/GYN, and they can earn up to $65 in Target gift cards. Even just the pre-screening that I do takes about 5 minutes or less. And if they qualify, we can go into session 1, which takes about 45 minutes. But even if they don't qualify, they walk away with a $5 Target gift card, and that's what I consider, we call that a Starbucks over at Target.
This qualification, what do you mean?
Well, there's
Qualify for,
yeah, I get it. There's a screening that we go through, and there's some questions that I ask around alcohol use and contraception use. Because remember I said most women don't even know, 50% don't even know they're pregnant until about 9 to 12 weeks. So that's kind of what we go through. And, if I happen to meet someone who, is using contraception regularly, then they don't really qualify for this program. But like I said, they could still walk away with a $5 Target gift card. If not, like I said, we go through session 1, which is about 45 minutes. I meet up with them a month later, about 15 minutes, and then I do 2 follow-ups, which probably take about 10 minutes apiece. And so, doing all that, they can earn up to $65. And what they get at the end is information. Yes, Joe, what?
2 minutes left.
Oh, I know, I'm done. I just want them to know that that's my phone number on the bottom. If you have a teenager, because I talk about this in high school, so that those young women, even though they're not having children and hopefully not drinking, I still want them to get the information about contraception and alcohol use. And hopefully, the earlier they get this, the better it will be for them. So there's my phone number, or Tony has my email address. And so, anybody can reach me if they want to find out more or to fill out that parental release so that their teenager can do it too. So any questions or thoughts or concerns or anything that came up about the FASD or the marijuana and pregnancy that you'd like to ask?
I would like to know whether or not if you use, especially now, marijuana or the edibles, can your body build up a level of it so that if you do wind up getting pregnant, you can affect the health of your unborn baby because you were a regular user of it?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Tony, I don't know. I do know about regular use and buildup of THC in breast milk. So my thought would be, I don't know, Joe, if you want to add anything to this, but my thought would be, that you do build up a certain concentration of THC in your body. And, if you do get pregnant, my thought was it could be in your system. I don't know, Joe, is that true? Do you think that regular use can build up that concentration?
Well, when our bodies store the THC, it stores it in our fat cells. So I don't know how much of that is going in our bloodstream and through the placenta. So I know when we use while we're pregnant, that is going into our bloodstream. The THC is going into the past the placenta, but the stored THC is in our fat cells. So I don't exactly know how that affects the fetus. But if you do quit, eventually, within weeks and months, that THC will dissipate out of the body.
Okay, good to know. You guys, do you have anything? Thoughts, concerns?
If anybody does think though of something afterwards, Tony, just email me because you've got my email address. Let me know and I'll
Absolutely.
answer.
Absolutely.
I'm always open to that. That's my job, man. What I do.
All right, then, we're going to wrap this up. We thank you so much, Teresa and Joe. Excellent presentation, very, very informative.
Thank you.
Things I never even considered, which is why I asked about the build-up question, because with the legalization of marijuana and edibles, that seems to be now more what younger people are utilizing on a regular basis. And so I'm wondering, if we build it up in the body, can it affect pregnancy? But
Well, one thing I'm thinking of here, Tony, is that, from what I've heard, and is that like when there's another drug that gets stored in your fat. I think isn't it, Joe, is it LSD that gets stored in your fat?
I'm not sure what the LSD, the acid.
There is another drug that gets stored in your fat, and I'm pretty sure that. And they talk about the fact that, that can affect you later, that you can have these trips from the acid that has been being stored in your fat. And so if that could happen, I gotta find that out. Now I want to know, now I'm gonna ask about that and find out for myself, because I would think that there would be a connection, but I don't want to say the wrong thing, and give somebody the wrong information. So
Great question, though.
it is a good question, especially now that's legal for adults over 18,
yeah,
21.
yeah. I don't know. Common sense kind of tells you if it's within the body, then it can affect the body. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But again, great presentation, and we thank you guys for your time. And you guys, we will be back Thursday. We will be talking about co-parenting and divorce. So thank you all for joining, and we will see you on Thursday.
Great. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.